Most people think the secret to building wealth is earning more money. They imagine that if they could just get a higher salary, or start a side hustle, or land that dream job, then suddenly everything would fall into place. But something interesting happens when you start studying people who are actually good with money. You realize wealth isn't only about how much you earn, it's about what you stop spending on. Because every dollar you don't waste becomes a dollar that can work for you. A dollar that can grow, a dollar that can eventually buy you freedom. Over the last few years, I started paying close attention to where my money was going. Not in a restrictive way, not in a never enjoy life kind of way, but in a very simple way. I started asking one question before buying anything. Is this actually improving my life, or am I just buying it out of habit? And that question completely changed the way I spend money. In fact, there are 10 things I've completely stopped buying, not because I'm trying to live like a minimalist monk, but because removing these things from my spending has given me more money, more clarity, and surprisingly, more happiness. And the crazy part? I don't feel like I sacrificed anything important. So in this video, I'm going to share the 10 things I no longer spend money on, and why cutting them out made such a huge difference. Some of these might surprise you. And the last one is something almost everyone spends money on without even realizing it. Let's start with the first one, books. Now, before you get the wrong idea, I absolutely love reading. Reading might be one of the best investments you can make in yourself, because knowledge is the one asset nobody can ever take away from you. Trends change, technology evolves, clothes go out of fashion, but knowledge stays with you for the rest of your life. So the problem isn't books. The problem is how we buy them. For years, every time I wanted to read something new, I would buy the physical copy. My bookshelf slowly filled up with books I had read once and never opened again. Eventually, I realized something. There are only a handful of books that truly change your life. Those are the ones worth keeping. So now I only buy physical copies of books I know I'll revisit again and again. Everything else, I read digitally, or borrow it from the library. The result? I still read just as much, but spend far less, and my home isn't turning into a storage unit for books I'll never touch again. The second thing I stopped buying is brand new cars, and this one can save people tens of thousands of dollars. A brand new car might feel exciting. The smell, the spotless interior, the feeling of driving something that nobody else has owned. But financially, it's one of the fastest ways to destroy money. The moment you drive a new car off the lot, it immediately loses a huge portion of its value. And within a few years, that depreciation becomes massive. In other words, you're paying a premium for something that is actively losing value every day. Now, don't get me wrong. There's nothing wrong with wanting a nice car, but timing matters. Buying expensive, depreciating assets before building wealth can delay your financial freedom by years. So instead of chasing the newest car, I focus on something much more powerful, owning assets first. Because once your investments are generating income, then buying a luxury car becomes a reward, not a financial setback. The third thing I stopped buying is souvenirs when traveling. Traveling itself is something I absolutely love spending money on. Experiences, new cultures, new places. Those are memories that stay with you forever. But the small items people buy during trips, they rarely hold the same value. A magnet, a keychain, a random decorative object from a tourist shop. At first, it feels meaningful, but months later, it becomes clutter. Instead of filling my home with souvenirs, I started doing something different. I document my trips, photos, videos, short journal entries. And what I discovered is that those memories bring back the experience far better than any physical object ever could. A single photo can instantly take you back to a moment. The food, the sounds, the people, the feeling of being there. And it doesn't require filling your shelves with things you'll eventually forget about. The fourth thing I stopped buying is constant upgrades. Technology companies release new versions of products every year. New phones, new watches, new laptops, and every time they do, they make it feel like the previous version is suddenly outdated. But if you look closely, most upgrades are incredibly small. a slightly better camera, a slightly faster processor, a slightly brighter screen. But the price difference, that's usually huge. I noticed something interesting about happiness when it comes to technology. The biggest jump in satisfaction happens when you go from not having something to having it. But the jump from version 1 to version 2 to version 3 gets smaller and smaller. Yet we keep paying more for those tiny improvements. Now, before upgrading anything, I ask myself a simple question. Is this actually solving a real problem, or am I just chasing something new? Most of the time, the answer is obvious. The fifth thing I stopped buying is things just because they're on sale. This is one of the oldest tricks in the marketing playbook. Stores advertise huge discounts, 30% off, 40% off, sometimes even 70% off. And suddenly, something we never planned to buy feels like a great deal. But there's a simple truth most people forget. If you spend money on something you didn't actually need, you didn't save money, you spent money. Sales are only valuable if you were already planning to buy the item anyway. Otherwise, they're just a clever way to empty your wallet. The sixth thing I stopped putting money into is investments I don't understand. This one is extremely important because when people hear about others making money in certain investments, they often jump in without fully understanding what they're doing. Crypto, stocks, startups, real estate. All of these can be powerful ways to build wealth, only if you understand how they work. Blindly investing in something because it's trending is one of the fastest ways to lose money. No one will ever care about your money as much as you do, which means understanding where it's going is not optional, it's essential. The seventh thing I stopped buying is fast fashion. For years, I used to buy cheap clothing regularly. It felt harmless because each item was inexpensive. But over time, those purchases added up. And the worst part? Most of those clothes didn't last. They faded, they stretched, they went out of style. And eventually, they disappeared from my wardrobe entirely. So I made a change. Instead of buying many cheap items, I started buying fewer high-quality pieces, clothes that last longer, clothes that actually feel better to wear. And interestingly, something unexpected happened. Having fewer choices made life easier. Less time deciding what to wear, less clutter in the closet, more mental space. Sometimes less really is more. The eighth thing I stopped spending money on is high-maintenance routines, things that require constant upkeep, appointments, regular replacements, endless maintenance cycles. Because those things don't just cost money, they cost time. And time is something you can never get back. Every hour spent maintaining something is an hour that could have been spent learning, creating, building, or resting. Now, that doesn't mean eliminating self-care or enjoyment, but it does mean being mindful of routines that quietly drain both time and money. The ninth thing I stopped buying is gifts out of obligation. This one might sound controversial. Giving gifts can be a beautiful thing, but many times people exchange gifts out of social expectation rather than genuine intention. Buying something just because you feel like you have to. Receiving something you don't really need, then feeling pressure to return the favor. It becomes a cycle. Instead, I prefer meaningful gestures, spending time together, sharing experiences, or giving something thoughtful when it truly matters, because meaningful moments are remembered far longer than random objects. And finally, the 10th thing I stopped buying is something many people never question: impressing people. A lot of spending decisions are driven by one hidden motivation: approval. Buying things so others see us a certain way. A nicer car, more expensive clothes, flashier gadgets. But once you realize something important, that motivation starts to disappear. Most people are far too focused on their own lives to spend much time judging yours. And even if they do, their opinion doesn't pay your bills. It doesn't build your investments, and it definitely doesn't give you freedom. Real wealth isn't about looking rich. It's about having options. The option to choose how you spend your time. The option to walk away from things you don't enjoy. The option to live life on your own terms. And that option comes from making intentional decisions with money, not extreme sacrifices, not eliminating joy, just removing the things that never truly mattered in the first place. Because when you stop spending money on things that don't improve your life, you suddenly have far more resources for the things that do. And that simple shift can change everything. So the next time you're about to buy something, pause for a moment. Ask yourself one question. Is this actually making my life better, or am I just following a habit? You might be surprised by how many purchases disappear once you start thinking this way. And those small decisions, repeated over time, are exactly what build financial freedom. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you subscribe for more content about money, mindset, and building a life with more freedom. And if you want to see the exact system I use to manage my money every month, check out the next video on the screen. I'll see you there.